Welcome back to Legacy Ignited. Tonight's story will pull you into a world where one whispered sentence, "My room only has one bed," changed everything, and the cowboy's reply left her in tears. She stood in the fading light, clutching her shawl, her voice breaking as she whispered, "My room only has one bed." In a world where trust was dangerous and kindness rare, those words carried a weight that could shatter or save her. The cowboy paused, his eyes dark with secrets, and what he said next brought tears to her face. But behind his quiet promise hid shadows of a past soaked in blood, shadows that would soon come knocking at their door. One night, the silence of the prairie would erupt in gunfire, and Clara would learn just how far this man was willing to go for her. Was his vow truly born of honor, or was it the last stand of a haunted soul? The answer would leave her trembling, her heart torn between grief and hope, and change both their lives forever. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, make sure to subscribe and join our growing family here on Legacy Ignited. Your support keeps these powerful journeys alive, and I'd be honored to have you with us. The desert sky bled red and gold as the sun sank behind the jagged mountains, throwing long shadows across the dusty frontier town of Willow Creek. The streets were nearly empty, save for a few horses tied outside the saloon and the low murmur of men inside gambling away their pay. But on that night, the story didn't begin in the noise of the saloon or the chaos of a gunfight. It began with a single woman standing at the edge of town, clutching her shawl against the cooling wind, waiting for a man she had only just met. Her name was Clara, a woman of quiet strength and striking beauty. Though life on the edge of survival had carved weariness into her eyes, she had come west chasing a new beginning, but all she found was hardship, suspicion, and men who looked at her not as a person, but as a prize. That night, with nowhere to stay, she stood at a crossroads of desperation and hope. The cowboy rode in slow, the creak of his saddle the only sound against the hush of dusk. His name was Samuel Hayes, a rancher known in whispers as both a man of honor and a man haunted by shadows he never spoke about. Dust clung to his boots, and his face bore the wear of years under the sun. But his eyes, steel gray and unreadable, gave away little. Clara had met him only hours before, when he had helped her lift a heavy crate at the general store. A gesture, small but filled with the kind of respect she hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't leer, didn't smirk, didn't treat her like a spectacle. He simply tipped his hat and walked on. Something in that quiet dignity had compelled her to ask if he knew where a woman might find a safe place for the night. Now, as the evening deepened, Samuel stopped his horse before her and dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. "You still without a room, miss?" His voice was low, calm, carrying a warmth that seemed to settle her restless fear. Clara nodded, her fingers tightening around the frayed edge of her shawl. "Every inn's full," she admitted softly. "They looked at me like I didn't belong, like I wasn't worth the bed." She paused, her voice trembling with the weight of humiliation. "I only found one place." But she looked away, ashamed to say it aloud. Samuel tilted his head, studying her with quiet patience. But what? Her breath caught. The words felt heavier than they should have, but she spoke them anyway, each syllable laced with vulnerability. "My room only has one bed." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the wind whistling through the empty street. Clara's heart hammered in her chest, fearing what he might say, fearing the smirk, the crude remark, the implication she had heard too many times from too many men. But Samuel didn't laugh, didn't sneer, didn't let his eyes wander. Instead, his face grew solemn, and he took off his hat, holding it against his chest as though the words deserved reverence. His reply was not what she expected. "A bed don't mean sin, Miss Clara. It don't mean shame. If it's the only one, then we'll sit back to back and keep watch till morning. I'll not let harm touch you under my watch." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. She had steeled herself against kindness for so long, built walls against disappointment, and here stood a man who could have taken advantage of her vulnerability, but instead offered her dignity. His words cut through her defenses, striking at something tender she had nearly forgotten she possessed. Trust. Clara blinked quickly, turning away to hide her tears, but Samuel noticed. He didn't comment, didn't press. Instead, he led his horse by the reins and nodded toward the boarding house at the edge of town. "Come on then, best get you off the street before nightfall. Folks out here, they're not all kind." They walked together in silence, the sound of his boots steady beside her softer steps. The air grew colder, and Clara pulled the shawl tighter, but inside she felt a strange warmth stirring, one she couldn't name. When they reached the boarding house, the dim lantern light flickered across the porch, casting eerie shadows on the weathered boards. Clara hesitated at the door, doubt clawing at her. Was this wise? Was she foolish to trust a man she hardly knew? Samuel seemed to sense her hesitation. He stopped, meeting her eyes with a calm steadiness. "I won't step foot inside unless you ask me to," he said firmly. "But I'll sleep on the porch if that makes you feel safer. You've had enough to carry. No woman should face the dark alone." Her throat tightened. The world had taught her to expect cruelty, yet here stood a cowboy who offered nothing but protection without demand. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. I don't want to be alone. Please." Inside, the room was small, the air carrying the faint smell of wood smoke and dust. The bed was narrow, pressed against the wall, its quilt patched but clean. A single chair sat by the window, and Clara placed her bundle down with trembling hands. Samuel set his hat on the chair and leaned his rifle against the wall, his every movement unhurried, respectful. He didn't fill the silence with chatter. He let it be, as though giving her space to breathe. Clara lowered herself onto the edge of the bed, the springs creaking beneath her slight weight. She clasped her hands in her lap, her gaze fixed on the floorboards. "You don't have to stay," she said softly, almost testing him. "I've troubled you enough." Samuel pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat, resting his forearms on his knees. His voice was steady, without a trace of impatience. "You're no trouble. Trouble's the men who see a woman alone and think she's theirs to claim. I've seen enough of that to last me a lifetime. Not tonight. Not while I'm here." Her chest ached at his words, a strange mixture of sorrow and relief flooding through her. For years she had carried the burden of being unseen, unheard, her worth measured only by what others wanted from her. Yet Samuel saw her humanity without asking for anything in return. She turned her face to the wall, her tears slipping silently into the quilt. His promise lingered in the room like a shield, wrapping her in safety she had almost forgotten could exist. In that quiet moment, Clara realized the night would not be defined by fear, but by the one man who had chosen to answer her vulnerability with honor. And yet, as the lantern light flickered and the wind howled outside, Clara couldn't shake the question rising in her chest: what kind of man carried such honor in a world so cruel, and what secrets weighed on him so heavily that his eyes carried storms? The night stretched long, the lantern casting shifting shadows across the wooden walls as Clara lay awake, her back turned to Samuel, who sat in the chair by the window. She could hear his steady breathing, the soft scrape of his boots as he shifted now and then, but not once did he lie down, not once did he let himself rest. The weight of his presence was both comforting and mysterious. She wondered what kind of man could show such restraint in a world that had taught her only fear. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of voices mocking her, faces from her past telling her she would never belong, that she was a fool for trusting anyone. But every time she stirred awake, she found Samuel's silhouette steady at the window, his rifle within reach, his watchful eyes guarding not just her safety, but her fragile sense of worth. When dawn broke, the pale light spilling through the thin curtains, Clara sat up to find him still in the chair, his hat tilted low, but his eyes awake. She swallowed hard, guilt rising in her chest. "You didn't sleep at all," she whispered. Samuel shook his head, adjusting the brim of his hat. "Sleep can wait, trust can't." The words stung in ways she didn't expect, because they carried truth. She had almost forgotten that trust was more precious than rest, more vital than comfort. They stepped into the crisp morning air, the town stirring slowly to life. The saloon doors creaked, merchants swept their porches, and a few curious eyes followed them. Clara felt the weight of those stares, felt the way whispers seemed to cling to her steps. She quickened her pace, but Samuel's stride remained steady, unbothered. When they reached his horse, he glanced at her. "You've got plans past this town?" She shook her head, clutching her shawl. "I came west for work, for a chance, but everywhere I go, doors close before I can knock." Her voice faltered. "I thought maybe here, things would be different." Samuel studied her for a moment before speaking. "Different ain't easy out here. Folks judge quick, but I got land. Too much for one man to tend. Could use the help of someone who won't run at the first storm." Clara's heart skipped. His offer was simple, but it carried weight, not just of survival, but of belonging, yet fear lingered. She had trusted before, only to be left broken. "Why me?" she asked cautiously. He met her gaze, his grey eyes steady. "Because you're still standing. Most would have given up by now. That means something." They rode out together, the prairie unfolding before them. Endless fields of grass swaying under the wind, mountains rising in the distance like watchful giants. Clara's spirit lifted with the open horizon, but unease gnawed at her. She knew safety was fragile, and whispers in town had carried warnings, rumors of outlaws, men who preyed on the vulnerable. When they reached the ranch, the land spread wide, dotted with cattle and framed by a modest cabin and barn. Samuel dismounted and offered his hand to help her down, a gesture both respectful and grounding. Clara accepted, though her hands trembled slightly. The days that followed unfolded with a rhythm Clara had never known. She cooked simple meals, tended to chores, and even learned to ride under Samuel's patient instruction. Yet beneath the calm surface, tension brewed. Each evening, Samuel would sit outside the cabin, staring into the distance as though waiting for something or someone. His jaw would tighten, his eyes clouded, and Clara began to sense that the man who had given her safety was also a man carrying heavy ghosts. One evening, as the sky blazed orange and purple, Clara stepped out to find him sitting on the porch, his rifle leaning against the railing. She hesitated before asking softly, "What is it you're waiting for?" Samuel's shoulders stiffened, his gaze fixed on the horizon. After a long pause he answered, his voice low, "Men don't forget debts, and mine was paid in blood." Clara's stomach tightened. She wanted to ask more, but his expression warned her that some truths cut deeper than silence could heal. That night, as she lay in the small cabin bed, a sound shattered the quiet, the distant thud of hooves, many of them carrying a rhythm of threat. Samuel was already at the window, his rifle in hand. Clara's breath caught. He turned to her, eyes sharp, voice calm but urgent. "Stay low, don't open the door, no matter what you hear." Fear surged through her, but before she could protest, the thunder of horses stopped outside, followed by rough voices calling Samuel's name. The cabin door rattled under heavy fists. "Hayes, come out and face us, coward." Samuel stepped onto the porch, his rifle steady, his figure outlined by the lantern glow. Clara crouched near the bed, heart pounding, straining to hear. A man's voice boomed through the night, laced with malice. "You thought you could hide, Samuel, thought you could start over. That blood's still on your hands, and tonight, you pay." Clara's hands shook as she clutched the quilt, confusion and dread colliding in her chest. What had Samuel done? Why were these men here, spitting venom like he was their sworn enemy? She dared a glance through the crack in the window and saw half a dozen riders, their faces hard with hate, guns glinting under moonlight. Samuel's voice rang out, calm but resolute. "The blood I spilled was to protect the innocent. If you came here for revenge, you'll have to walk through me first." The leader snarled, "We ain't leaving without a reckoning. You can hand over the woman, or we burn this place to the ground." Clara's breath seized in her throat, the words slamming into her like a blow. Hand her over. Why her? What did these men want with her? Fear turned to ice, but beneath it, anger stirred. Samuel stepped forward, his rifle aimed squarely at the leader. "You touch one hair on her head, and I'll send you to meet the devil himself." The standoff hung heavy, silence pulsing like a heartbeat before chaos could erupt. Clara pressed her back to the wall, every nerve screaming. She had sought safety, found trust, and now stood at the edge of a storm that threatened to tear it all away. In that moment, one truth seared into her soul: whatever secrets Samuel carried, whatever blood stained his past, he was willing to risk everything for her. But the night was far from over, and as the riders shifted in their saddles, hands twitching near their holsters, Clara knew this was only the beginning of a battle that could shatter both their lives. The air was thick with tension, every heartbeat a drum against Clara's ribs as Samuel faced the riders. The leader sneered, his hand hovering near his gun. "Last chance. Hayes, step aside, or we'll take her." Samuel's voice cut through the night like steel. "You'll take her over my dead body." In the silence that followed, Clara felt her soul tremble. No one had ever stood for her before, not like this, not with death in the balance. The first shot rang out like thunder, and chaos exploded. Gunfire split the darkness, hooves stamped, men shouted. Samuel moved with deadly precision, his rifle flashing, his figure fierce against the firelight. Clara ducked behind the wall, praying with every breath, yet her eyes never left him. He fought like a man with nothing to lose, each shot fired not for pride, but for her. 2 riders fell, the others scattering into the shadows. But the leader pressed forward, his revolver drawn. Samuel turned, but not fast enough. The gun roared, and Samuel staggered, a crimson bloom spreading across his shirt. Clara screamed, rushing from the cabin despite his command. She caught him as he fell to his knees, his breath ragged, his strength slipping away. "No, please," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "Don't leave me, not now." Samuel's hand found hers, gripping tight despite the blood. His eyes, clouded with pain, softened as they met hers. "Clara, all my life, I carried ghosts, fought wars, lost people I swore to protect, thought my soul was beyond saving. Then you reminded me what it meant to stand for something pure. Don't let this break you. Promise me, you'll keep standing." Her heart shattered, but she nodded, sobbing. "I promise." The leader approached, rage twisting his features, gun aimed at them both. Clara rose, her hands trembling but fierce. With desperation, she picked up Samuel's rifle, the weight heavy but steady in her grasp. "You won't take him. You won't take me." Her voice quivered, but her aim did not. The outlaw sneered, mocking her courage. The crack of the rifle echoed, and his body crumpled into the dirt. The remaining riders fled, the night swallowing their retreat, leaving only silence, smoke, and the pounding of Clara's heart. She dropped the rifle, falling to her knees beside Samuel. His breathing was shallow, his strength fading, but his lips curved into the faintest smile. "You stood, Clara, you stood." His hand fell from hers, and in that moment, the world stilled. Clara wept into his chest, the man who had given her dignity, who had shown her honor when the world offered none. Yet as the dawn broke, painting the land in light, she felt his promise echo in her soul. Samuel's sacrifice was not an end, but a beginning, a vow, written in blood and tears, that she would carry forward. She buried him beneath the wide sky he loved, the horizon stretching endless and free. And though grief weighed heavy, she rose each day to tend the land, her spirit unbroken. For every whisper of the wind, every rustle of grass, carried his voice, reminding her that trust, once given, could outlive even death. If this story touched your heart, remember there are countless more waiting to be told. Subscribe and be part of our Legacy Ignited family, where every tale keeps the flame of hope and humanity alive. Your likes, your comments, and your presence here mean the world, and together, we can make sure these voices are never forgotten.